Hello. Today General Hospital will reveal Willow had once been the kind of mother whose wounds ran so deep, she couldn't find the strength to fight. In the courtroom, when the judge handed Michael full custody of Wiley and Amelia, she did not scream, she did not protest, she simply broke. Silently. Internally. The decision shattered what little resolve she had left, and for days afterward, she wandered through her life like a ghost, questioning everything. Her worth, her choices, her ability to protect what mattered most. But it was during the moment of her collapse, when she fainted at the end of that gut-wrenching hearing, that something far more dangerous than grief awoke within her. It wasn't just the physical stress of heartbreak and trauma, it was the quiet ignition of fury, of pain weaponized into purpose, and a quiet, seething determination to take back what had been stolen from her. Gone was the docile woman who played by rules others had written. What rose in her place was a strategist cloaked in vulnerability, a mother who would not beg anymore, but who would plot. In the darkened corners of that emotional defeat, Willow began to construct a blueprint of vengeance, not for destruction, but for reclamation. And at the center of her calculated plan stood Drew, the unwitting pawn in a war he didn't even know had begun. To the world, to Michael, to Jason. Willow was still recovering. Fragile, lost, in therapy. But beneath the soft tones and apologetic glances, Willow was laying traps with the precision of a tactician. She began to sow doubt in Drew's mind, planting the narrative that Jason had turned against him, that Michael had manipulated everything behind the scenes, and that the two men were working in tandem to erase Drew from any relevance, especially when it came to the children. Drew, still carrying scars from Jason's previous betrayals and his own insecurities about fatherhood and legacy, began to spiral slowly under Willow's influence. What Drew saw as intimate venting, private confessions shared in trust, were in fact being carefully recorded by Willow. She captured hours of audio, Drew's angry mutterings about Michael, his suspicion of Jason, his occasional violent language said in frustration. She stored each file like a weapon, then meticulously trimmed and edited them, isolating every word that, when presented without context, could be used to paint Drew as unhinged, erratic, even emotionally abusive. And when the audio clips were perfectly shaped, she delivered them, not to the authorities, not to Michael, but to the one place she knew would cause the most irreversible damage, the media. A journalist known for her vendetta against Carly, a woman willing to destroy reputations for the right headline, was more than eager to receive the anonymous tip. In less than 24 hours, Port Charles was in chaos. Social media was ablaze with leaked audio, carefully captioned and accompanied by chilling speculations. Is Drew Kane a threat to children? Headlines questioned his mental stability, his fitness to be around kids, and, most damningly, why Michael had allowed his children to be in close proximity to such a volatile man. What had started as whispers became roars, and Willow stood at the epicenter, calm amidst the storm she had engineered. Michael was blindsided. His judgment as a father was called into question not only by the public but by family members and social workers alike. The Department of Children and Family Services opened an emergency inquiry. A caseworker made an unannounced visit, catching Drew in a moment of unfiltered frustration, enough to raise a flag, enough to be documented. Michael, scrambling to control the narrative, tried to reach out to Jason, but even he could see the optics were crumbling. Meanwhile, Willow made her next move with flawless timing. She publicly disclosed that she had voluntarily entered an intensive mental health program, painting a portrait of a mother committed to healing, to regaining balance for the sake of her children. She had paperwork, therapist evaluations, character witnesses, all ready to be presented should the case be revisited. She appeared not as a woman seeking revenge, but as a mother evolving into her strongest self. The contrast between her image and the unraveling depiction of Drew was impossible to ignore. With the media firestorm still burning and pressure mounting from every direction, Willow requested a private meeting with Michael. She came not as a supplicant, but as a force of quiet resolve. She didn't threaten, she didn't beg. She simply laid out the reality: either you return Wiley and Amelia to me and make this all go away, or I let the blaze continue. She implied nothing. She confirmed everything. And Michael, for the first time in this war, saw that he was no longer in control. Faced with the collapse of his reputation, his fitness as a parent under scrutiny, and no support from the institutions that once sided with him, Michael did the unthinkable: he surrendered. He signed the documents, restoring primary custody to Willow. It wasn't a negotiation. It was a capitulation. Willow, with no lawyers, no public outcry, had flipped the entire narrative, using nothing but the truth twisted through a lens she had polished herself. When the papers were filed and the children were returned, she didn't celebrate. There was no fanfare. Only silence. The kind of silence that follows victory, not born from pride, but necessity. Drew was cut off entirely. Blocked from contacting Willow, marked in the system as a potential emotional risk, and left in the ruins of a battle he never knew he was part of. Whether Willow ever truly loved him became irrelevant. In the end, he had served his role. And now, he was expendable. Willow walked away from the ashes of her old self not just as a mother reunited with her children, but as a woman transformed by betrayal, tempered by injustice, and sharpened by strategy. What she did was not noble. It was not clean. But it was effective. And in the ruthless world she had been forced to survive in, that was enough. Michael found himself instantly engulfed in a firestorm of public backlash, one that spread with the velocity and heat of a scandal long overdue. The media frenzy erupted across Port Charles and beyond, with local news outlets, parenting forums, and even national gossip sites seizing upon the damning question echoing in every corner. How could a responsible father like Michael allow someone as mentally unstable as Drew to remain in close proximity to his children? The audio files and images, previously leaked with carefully timed precision, were now dissected and replayed in endless loops across talk shows and news cycles. Public opinion, once firmly in Michael's favor, began to turn sharply, casting doubt on his judgment and parental fitness. And all the while, Willow remained unseen, watching, calculating, waiting. Unbeknownst to Michael, the true depth of Willow's plan had only just begun to reveal itself. While the town reeled from the media fallout, she discreetly forwarded a comprehensive package to the Department of Child Protective Services. Within it were carefully selected voice recordings and screenshots, subtly edited to highlight Drew's volatile language and expressions of frustration while omitting any context that might have softened their interpretation. Accompanying these materials was an anonymous letter, written in a calm, concerned tone, urging the agency to re-examine the court's prior custody ruling, citing the presence of unrecognized risk factors that had potentially placed the children in danger. It was presented not as a vengeful attack, but as a civic duty from a concerned observer, worried about the emotional and physical safety of Wiley and Amelia. The system responded swiftly. A child welfare caseworker was dispatched for an unannounced wellness check at Michael's residence. At the time, Drew was temporarily living there, his presence already under scrutiny. During the visit, Drew, fatigued, irritable, and unaware of the investigation's origin, spoke candidly and with unfiltered agitation, making offhand comments about the stress of the situation and his growing resentment toward Michael and Jason. Though Drew believed he was merely venting, the social worker, trained to recognize potential psychological red flags, noted his erratic tone and combative energy in the report. This report, paired with the evidence previously submitted by Willow, formed a damning narrative. It was filed back with the court within days, marked urgent for review. While the scrutiny on Michael intensified, Willow emerged from the shadows with a public declaration that shocked many. She announced that she had voluntarily admitted herself to a specialized psychological treatment center for a 2-week intensive mental health program. To some, this may have appeared as an act of retreat, a moment of fragility, but for Willow, it was the keystone in her strategy. This move reframed the conversation around her mental health. She was no longer the unstable mother accused of emotional breakdowns and irresponsibility. She was now the mother seeking healing, owning her narrative, and proactively managing her well-being. It directly undermined Michael's previous legal argument that she was too emotionally compromised to care for the children. Armed with a positive psychological evaluation, a character reference from her attending therapist, and documented progress notes, Willow returned for the emergency custody hearing with a transformed aura. Gone was the tear-streaked woman crushed by the weight of courtroom defeat. In her place stood a composed, articulate mother who not only acknowledged her past struggles but demonstrated accountability, resolve, and grace under pressure. Her legal team, though small, moved with precision. The judge, visibly taken aback by the stark contrast between her current state and previous courtroom appearances, began to view the custody battle through a newly adjusted lens. Michael, who had once carried himself with unshakable confidence, found himself flanked by uncertainty. For the first time, he was no longer perceived as the protective father but rather as the man who had exercised poor judgment, ignored potential warning signs, and allowed an unstable figure like Drew to integrate into his children's lives. His claims that Willow was emotionally unfit now seemed hypocritical and out of touch. Jason, sensing the rapidly changing tides, attempted to intervene, urging both parties to seek compromise, reminding Willow that co-parenting required understanding. But Willow no longer entertained intermediaries. The days of begging, of pleading for understanding, were over. She delivered her offer to Michael with the calm force of inevitability. It was not a threat, nor a plea. It was a declaration of control, a reshaping of power dynamics that left no ambiguity. If Michael agreed to relinquish custody and return Wiley and Amelia to her, she would quietly withdraw the anonymous complaints, work to smooth over the media chaos, and allow the public to move on. But if he resisted, if he clung to control, she would unleash the rest. There were more recordings, more documented behaviors, and, most dangerously, more secrets. Secrets from Michael's past that had remained buried. Financial decisions made under Carly's shadow. Decisions made at ELQ that could, if exposed, not only destroy his personal reputation but jeopardize his standing within the company. Michael stared at her across the courtroom, finally understanding that he had underestimated her entirely. He hadn't seen the woman standing before him, not as she truly was. This was not the same Willow he once fell in love with, nor the one who had stood by his side through battles past. This Willow had evolved. Hardened. Strategized. She wasn't asking for her children back. She was demanding justice for the pain inflicted upon her soul. And she had learned how to speak the language of power in the only way the court, the press, and Michael himself would understand. Cornered, disgraced, and facing the very real possibility of losing not only his children but everything else he held dear, Michael relented. Quietly, humiliated, he signed the legal documents restoring primary custody of Wiley and Amelia to Willow. The courtroom remained silent as the papers changed hands. There were no cheers, no shouts, just a heavy, undeniable shift in energy. Willow had won, not by force, not by bribery, but by maneuvering the system that once worked against her. She had exposed its flaws, redirected its attention, and used every weapon available to mothers written off as broken. As the hearing adjourned and Michael slumped in his chair, Willow walked past him with quiet dignity, her head held high, her eyes unwavering. The children were hers again, not through pity or chance, but through strategy, courage, and an unrelenting will to reclaim what no one should have the right to take from a mother. She had sacrificed her innocence, perhaps even part of her humanity, but she had done it for Wiley and Amelia. And in her heart, she knew, no matter what anyone said, she had done the right thing. In the end, faced with relentless pressure from the media, the court, and the series of precision strikes that Willow had launched with devastating effect, Michael had no choice but to concede. The world that had once upheld his position as a righteous and responsible father had turned its back on him, and all his efforts to maintain control unraveled beneath the weight of Willow's unflinching strategy. He, who once commanded boardrooms and manipulated custody hearings with an air of superiority, now found himself cornered, powerless, and exposed. There was no one left to defend him, not Jason, not Carly, not even the system that once sided with him. As the courtroom clerk handed him the final custody transfer documents, Michael hesitated, not because he still believed he was right, but because he could finally feel the full measure of his defeat. He quietly signed the papers, his signature trembling not from the act itself, but from the shattering realization that everything he thought he had secured had slipped through his fingers. Across the room, Willow remained unmoved. She watched him sign without flinching, her face devoid of triumph or vengeance, but also of mercy. There were no tears, no whispers of gratitude, no relief. She had already cried all the tears she had. Those nights spent clutching a pillow where her children should have been, screaming into silence, praying for a miracle, those had emptied her. Now, as she stood reclaiming her children, the only thing left was the chilling calm of someone who had seen every possibility of loss and had refused to let it win. Her arms would soon hold Wiley and Amelia again, not because someone gave her permission, but because she seized back what had been unjustly taken. And as Michael looked up into her eyes one last time, he didn't see the woman he had underestimated, he saw the mirror of his own unraveling. Willow didn't walk out of the courtroom that day victorious in the conventional sense. There was no parade, no celebration. But what she walked away with was more sacred than recognition. It was her children, her dignity, and the knowledge that she had faced down a system, a family, and even the ghosts of her own fragility, and emerged whole. She had fought not with an army of attorneys or allies but with intelligence honed by grief and precision sharpened by betrayal. No one had stood beside her. No one had believed she could do it alone. And yet she had done just that. Drew, once her partner in both healing and defiance, did not survive the final phase of her transformation. Without announcement or confrontation, Willow severed ties with him completely. His calls were ignored. His messages left unread. The same state agencies that once viewed him as a potential father figure now flagged him as a liability. His name was quietly added to internal watch lists for emotional instability around minors, a note buried in case files that would follow him for years to come. He had outlived his usefulness in Willow's life, and though she may have once felt a deep connection to him, perhaps even love, that emotion had long been buried beneath the urgency of reclaiming her children. Whether she had used him intentionally or simply awakened to his limitations along the way, the result was the same: he no longer had a place in the life she was rebuilding. To the public, it was a stunning reversal. The quiet, broken mother had become a symbol of resilience. But to those who truly watched, who understood the layers beneath the image, Willow had become something more complex. She was no longer just a mother. She was a survivor of psychological warfare, a tactician of maternal instinct, and a woman who had burned away every softness within her to forge a spine made of iron. The compassion that once made her an easy target had been eclipsed by a steel-sharp clarity. She had learned to read people's intentions, to outmaneuver those who doubted her, and to weaponize her pain without remorse. The girl who once begged for understanding had become a woman who demanded respect, and commanded fear. In the quiet days that followed, Willow did not speak of her victory. She did not need to. She returned home, embraced her children, and began rebuilding a new life in silence. Those who crossed her path no longer viewed her as fragile or pitiable. There was a stillness in her now, a deliberate gravity that came only from surviving something no one else could see. The world had taken everything from her, and she had taken it back. And so, from that moment forward, the image of Willow in the minds of those who once doubted her was forever altered. No longer the gentle soul easily broken by courtrooms or whispers, she became the embodiment of what it meant to lose everything and still rise. A warrior cloaked in white, her smile laced not with sweetness, but with the cold, quiet victory of someone who had faced ruin, and rewritten her ending. She did not need forgiveness. She did not need applause. She needed only her children, and now, she had them.